This is Gary Zaleski, the host of The Gary Zaleski Show, the podcast for those who want to discover that human fuel called passion and build the life they have always wanted to live. I've been a professional speaker, author, and licensed minister for over 30 years, helping people professionally and personally who are tired of being stuck in the pursuit for something more. My wife calls me the human defibrillator because I jumpstart tired hearts and those minds that have checked out. I want you to become emotionally and financially profitable without sacrificing your faith or family. This show, it's all about the people I've connected with all over the world. People who have changed my life with their resiliency to never, ever quit. Shared moments that became lessons learned and laughter that took my breath away. Join me now in discovering the life you have always wanted to live. Well, welcome to the Gary Zaleski Show. Hey, listen, man, you better fasten your seatbelts right now because I have a friend of mine that is going to blow you away. Okay, what comes to your mind when I say stand-up comic? I mean, seriously, what's some of the thoughts that are penetrating you right now? Stand-up comic. Well, let me tell you something. You're going to maybe think a little bit different when you meet my dear friend, Dennis Gaxiola. He's been doing comedy since the birth of Jesus, okay? And so it's going to be amazing. I want to jump right in. Dennis, man, welcome to the Gary Zaleski Show. I'm going to hit it right out of the park, right? Dennis, people are listening. Why would they stay and listen to a stand-up comic right now?
Well, because I'm getting interviewed by the president of the Ukraine. What's the wrong, Zaleski? I'm not about that.
Yeah, it's not Zelensky, bro.
We've been sending a lot of
9 o'clock in the morning, and you boom, right away. Go ahead, man.
I often tell my wife, I say, I've had a pretty cool life. From 20 years in the military, 30 years doing stand-up comedy, performed in all 50 states, performed for the troops around the world, go into prisons doing comedy. I think I've had a pretty cool life.
You really have. And I think we're going to dive into that life right now. So if you're listening, you're an audience member, hey, listen, man, I'm telling you something. You might want to get something to write down because there's going to be some stuff that's going to be blown out and you're going to want to take some notes and check it out. All right. This is such a cheesy question, but I'm going to ask anyway because everybody asks it. How in the world did you get started being a stand-up comic? Did that happen from birth or what?
No, I mean, I'm a preacher's kid, so I never dreamt of being a comedian, but I loved comedy.
You're a preacher's kid.
Yeah, my dad was a minister, and I was in the Air Force in a leadership class. Before you become a sergeant, you got to go to leadership training. And the guy I sat next to the whole month-long course, he'd won the base talent show as a comedian. So we went back and forth the whole month, and the other guys were going like, you should do comedy. My friend Michael introduced me to stand-up comedy, and he changed the trajectory of my life. And I've been doing it ever since.
So what was your first gig? I mean, what was that? They always say, I'm really funny. Okay, really. Yeah. But what was your first intro?
There was a picnic on base, the base-wide summer picnic, and they had people from the talent show go up. And there was musicians and vocalists, and Michael was hosting it. So he gave me 5 minutes. And that was my first time trying to be funny. The first joke I ever did in public was my wife redefined potluck. If she uses a pot and the food don't burn, it was luck.
And you're telling me you were outside at a picnic?
At a picnic.
Do we stand up?
Yep. And that was my introduction to stand-up comedy. I mean, there's a lot of psychology behind that euphoria you get from doing stand-up. But it's instant acceptance and instant rejection. A personality like mine, it thrives off the acceptance of jokes. But
yeah,
I was the squirt in high school. My freshman year, I was 5'2", 75 pounds. I was the runt of Berkeley High with this size head. I was the original bobblehead. Or to Berkeley High. They thought I was East Indian.
Wait,
oh my God.
It's a bottle with this size head, man, bro. I'm going to just laugh my way through this.
This
Man.
was the size of my head when I was 2 years old. They they thought something was wrong, and they're like, "No, he's just got a big head."
Oh, bro, that is absolutely hilarious.
I hated
Yeah, I want to
Jack
ask
in the
you.
Box. That's all I'm saying is I hated Jack in the Box growing up.
Oh, God, you're killing me, man. I meet people all the time, and they think they're funny. Have you ever been around people that think they're funny? Like,
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
after I speak or something like that, and I do a little bit of humor, nothing like you do, but people come up to me and say, "Hey, I got something you might want to use in your show, or you might want to use." What do you do with people that think they're funny and they're just not funny? What do you do with those people?
In live, I just smile. Yeah, that's a good one. But on social media, I'll put out funny ideas. Just try to. I have people say, "Man, your posts get me through the day." So I try to put out silly stuff. But then there'll be somebody to come along and try to tag my joke, and I'm looking at them going,
Wait.
"You're an auto mechanic. I don't tell you how to
using
turn the
your
wrench."
jokes.
Yeah, I don't tell you how to turn the wrench. Please don't tell me how to do my jokes. But I got to just be gracious about it. But it is annoying. Or when people say, "You're a comedian, tell me a joke." And I'm like, I don't tell jokes. I tell stories.
Is there a difference between a comic and a humorist?
A humorist, I think, is more written. It's one of the things that people get uncomfortable when you talk about differences in ethnicity. But I've had many white comedians go, "How do you do that?" Like when I interact with the audience. Latino and African American cultures, you grow up with your uncles and aunties and cousins. And my nickname was Headman as a little boy. Whatever your character or physical flaw is, that's
they
your
go after
nickname.
it. They go.
Yeah. So you grow up with a quick wit. I was the runt, but I survived bullies by making everybody laugh. A lot of the educated comedians, they have like English backgrounds, literature backgrounds. So humorists are really good at writing out their thoughts in a humorous way. That's my take of it.
Wow.
Mark Twain was a great humorist.
You said something just a second ago, and I want to unpack it a little bit. You said when you were growing up, because of the culture, they went after you, called you big head, right?
Right.
Did you develop like this comedic, outgoing personality because some of the pain that you were holding inside? I don't know.
As an adult, yes, but as a kid, no, it was acceptance. To be in a group of people, like by the time I joined the Air Force, it happened to be that all the guys I played ball with happened to be black. And I wasn't serving the Lord. I got lost for a long time. We'd hang out at the club, and it would literally be 6, 7, 8 black guys against me doing the "your mama" jokes. And they would all come after me because I would be there with a shotgun blasting everybody. So when I run into my friends 30 years later, like, "You owe us your career because we made you funny." I'm like, "Nah, bro, it started with my family." And then as an adult, I always tell young comics, if you start comedy young, learn the first 7, 8 years, you're just learning how to be comfortable in front of people. You're not gonna be funny till you're 30. When you go through some heartbreak, when you go through things, then time and tragedy equals comedy. So that's the way I look at it.
Okay, I've never heard that one before. Time and tragedy equals comedy?
You can't make fun of a tragedy the day it happens. 2, 3 months from now, when you point out a humorous observation, you get people to laugh. You do it too soon, people are like, "Man, you are twisted." There is a formula there, a proven formula.
I totally get that. My wife and I wrote a book a few years ago called Big Laughs, Bigger Lessons. And it was 14 of our most embarrassing, humiliated moments in our lives that at the time it happened wasn't funny at all. But you step away from it long enough, it becomes the greatest stories ever. That's the stories you tell over and over again.
My relationship humor is gold. And when you find the humor in it, the other night, it's hot as you know, in California right now.
I live on the surface of the sun, man. There's no doubt about it.
We're sitting in bed and it's hot in our room. And my wife said, "You turned the fan off." And I said, and it's on her side of the room. I said, "No, I didn't." We're going back and forth about who turned the fan off. And then she gets out of bed to turn the fan on, and the fan was on. But yet So we're getting frustrated with each other in the moment, but the next morning we wake up and we're cracking up at each other. Like, are we that old where we don't even hear the fan anymore?
Oh man, we've been married, I don't know, Teresa and I, 34 years, 33 years. And we truly believe the only thing that's kept our marriage together is humor, is being able to laugh at situations.
Yep.
But do you ever find people that have no sense of humor, or they lost their sense of humor somewhere and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
about as fun to be around with as a rock or whatever?
I was talking to a friend. He didn't even realize it was a ministry, but it's undoubtedly a ministry. He goes with some comedians from schools to military bases called One Degree of Separation, and they all do their comedy, and then they talk about depression and suicide. And a neurologist that graduated from Stanford reached out to him and said, "What you're doing is amazing," because he did his PhD study on the effects of laughter on the brain. And lo and behold, Stanford verifies what God said. Laughter's good medicine. So there's people that have been through so much they can't laugh, but then they come up to me after and go, "I haven't laughed in years. I don't think stuff is funny. You made me laugh." And there's a release, the brain. And there's a physiological effect of good humor.
Well, it's amazing because one of my questions actually that I have for you is humor a good medication? Because I'm telling you right now, Dennis, a lot of people are medicating.
Oh, yeah.
Our society is under a lot of every kind of medication you could imagine. So how is humor, because the Bible does talk about that laughter is like a good medication. How does that work? I mean, there's people listening right now saying, wait, if I can laugh, how do I laugh?
Yeah, there is literally a physiological response to how your brain is firing and what parts of your brain are firing when you laugh. So laughter is healthy and physically, spiritually. And my hardest time can be sometimes going into a church as a comedian and who happens to be an evangelist, but having people look at me like, why is he joking around so much? Especially if they forget to say, this brother's a comedian. They were looking at me to give scriptures and I'm making fun of people. Like that, like our favorite story when you had me at that men's fellowship.
The greatest story ever. You came to our, let me set this up. I have to for people. So I used to have a men's meeting, a gathering, and we did not sit around small tables and talk about a video. Okay. We didn't. It was an event. So I invited Dennis in. Now you got to remember this church was white, and then white, right?
Mormons
so I invite
wow,
Dennis
you're
in.
white.
So I invite Dennis. Here's all these white guys, a room full of white guys. Dennis gets up on stage, and the first thing he says is,
"Wow, I love the diversity. You have short white people and tall white people." And I just went on and on, young white guys and old white guys. And it just broke the ice, pointing out the obvious.
You hit it, and these people that are listening saying, well, my life isn't funny. In fact, I've had nothing but tragedy. It seems like I live in chronic disappointment over and over again. I've asked God to help me, and he seems like 1,000 miles away. They might be listening right now, and they're saying, yeah, that's great. I should laugh, but I don't even know where to find my laughter. I'm so deeply ingrained in my horrible life. I don't even know where to start. What would you say to these people?
There's a season for everything. There is a season to mourn. There is a season to be sad. But there's a time where you've got to activate whatever faith you have and go, okay, that is behind me. My pastor teases me that he goes, "You were equipped for hurt." I've been through enough pain where both my sisters, I have two sisters, one brother, two sisters, they all said, "It's a miracle you're not an alcoholic or a drug addict." You've got to look at life and laugh at it, no matter how bad it is, because otherwise, what's the alternative? To stay in a state of funk the rest of your life? You go through seasons. I've just happened to be equipped because it is called a sense of humor. Professional comedians, our sense of humor is a little heightened compared to other people. And there's times it's inappropriate, but sometimes that's the funniest stuff, especially when people are hypersensitive about race. I go right after them because to sit there and ignore the reality denies God's creation. He knew what he was doing when he created cultures. And we're all uniquely different, equal, but different.
unwrap that for a minute, because there's the race card right now that we're hearing about a lot. And it seems like the more we talk about it, the more divided we become, not only politically, but even within the churches. There's tends to be some division going on as a result of that.
It's sad how we went backwards. And I share on stage about how, by today's standards, not the standards of the 70s and 80s, which was the greatest era ever. If you're born in the 60s and you're old enough to remember the 70s and 80s, where you were actually able to listen to music, we got the best of Motown, then into the origins of hip hop, which was when it was still good and clean, the Double Dutch Bus type of stuff. We went from all the greats of Motown. And I remember watching the Bowery Boys. Yeah, they were reruns on the Abbott and Costello on Saturday. These kids, they look at their phones, they don't know anything. But by today's standards, I got called an ethnic slur every day from junior high through high school. Back then, it was funny. And it was by a good friend who happened to be African American. We would walk by his house and he would see my brother and myself walking. He would call me Taco and my brother Sauce. That joke never got old. Kenny would laugh. What's up, Taco? What's up, Sauce? Taco Sauce. We would all laugh and walk to school together. If that happened today, CNN would fly in a reporter and make it a national story. They would start a GoFundMe because I was hurt by words.
Yeah, I won't even attempt to talk about my father's generation.
Oh, my God.
Because what they called each other back in those days, which were terms of endearment, literally terms of endearment, would be so offensive nowadays that it would send them off the chart. The Bible talks about this a little bit, that in the last days, there will be a high level of offense, that people will take offense to things very, very quickly. That's why I think it was so important to have you on the show today, because when you talk about comedy, what was one of the worst shows that you've ever had experience where you walk up on, because you guys, it's not a home run every time. Come on. I mean, people watch comedy on shows or TV, or they watch dry bar humor or whatever. These guys are boom, boom. It doesn't happen like that every time.
This was when I knew I had an opportunity to become a real comedian. Sinead O'Connor just passed away. So when she was young and popular 30 years ago, I go on stage at an underground comedy club in Sacramento. It was called the Mo Betterman Show. It was like the Tonight Show with no cameras. He would have politicians, poets, musicians, and every week have a comedian. He had his desk set up with the microphone. And,
wow.
And there's room for about 40 people in this little underground bar / studio. And I go on stage, and right up front, this nice young couple, both of them with their head shaved. I'm thinking Sinead O'Connor, that's the new popular thing. And I go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Sinead O'Connor. And the young husband raises his hand politely and says, she's going through chemo. My heart sunk.
Yes.
I turned and I put they had a brick wall. I faced the wall, and then I spun back around with my face burning with embarrassment. And I went, does anybody else have anything wrong with them? Does anybody? That young lady cracked up at that. I went for it, and I listed a bunch of things that today you couldn't say, but it showed that even in that hurtful moment when I had no malice in my heart, but I still went, anybody else have? And I just listed a bunch of things. The audience roared, and I walked off stage and went, as bad as that was, I know I've got the chops to do this. And then there's,
so that people that are listening, I mean, sometimes if they're going through the hardest time in their lives, those could be the very defining moments of really maybe even a call, or this is a thing you've always supposed to do, a purpose, even though that you felt a horrible situation happen. Out of that could be the very thing that's going to change your life, in a good way.
It's so important to enjoy life, because you're here today, you're gone tomorrow. And I don't want to come across as preachy, but when I do speak at churches, I tell people whatever binds you blinds you. If you're holding on to a hurt from 20, 30 years ago, that's who you are. You're a hurt young man. You're a hurt young woman. And to be willing to surrender those areas of your life, whatever it is, disregarding what you've been through. But what are you going to allow to define you?
Wow.
And that's the power of forgiveness.
Wow.
Brother Gary, that's the biggest person that we have trouble forgiving.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so hard for us to forgive ourselves?
Sometimes, whether it's religious guilt or just the pressure from our fathers to be the man. Men, when I do men's ministry, I tell the men, I said, our wives want us to understand them, but we don't understand ourselves. But to understand that we have to forgive ourselves and lean on God's grace and then move forward. There's healing in that, because whatever binds you, blinds you. Whatever you're holding on to, that's who you are.
It's funny because I have people all the time, they'll say to me, well, Gary, how do I find humor? How do I laugh? I go, listen to something funny. There's really no magic. You've got to, people tend to gravitate around people that bring them down. And I tell people, if you really want to get out of your funk, help somebody else get out of their funk, man. It's the giving away. Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
Hey, was Jesus funny?
Yes, he was funny. And
Jesus was funny.
Yes, zealots will look at what he said and get religious. But when you look at it with Jesus's wit, and he loved to spar with the Pharisees, he would go at them. I think God has a great sense of humor and a flat forehead. Because it's been thousands of years of him going like this.
That right there, Dennis, that is going to be my social media teaser for your show, for the show. Okay, say that again. Say that what you just said.
I think God has a great sense of humor and a flat forehead. He's been doing this for thousands of years, looking at his kids like, oh my God.
That is beyond crazy. So who is your favorite comedian other than you?
Too many to list. I love Michael Jr. because he's one of the ones that show. It's very rare that I see a comedian and get jealous in a healthy way. But when a comedian sees something so simple and finds 5 minutes of humor in it, I'm like, why didn't I see that? And Michael Jr. does that. When he does this thing about the different gospels where they keep killing Jesus. The first time I do that, oh my God, I was like, why didn't I see that? He's great. I've worked with so many great comedians from.
Well, you've traveled with Kings of Comedy. I mean,
yeah, I'm actually the executive producer of the Latin Kings of Comedy, as well as being on the tour. From Paul Rodriguez, who's a childhood hero, to Gabriel Iglesias, literally one of the top 5 comedians in the world. He does events in arenas around the world, and to go with him is amazing. So many great comics, guys that can take the simple and make people laugh. And then there's brilliant comedians. A lot of the young comics, they name Richard Pryor, and they try to be like Richard Pryor, but there was only one Richard Pryor, and you have to look at him in context. From the 1960s, a black man making fun of racism in America, he was 20 years ahead of his time, what he was doing. So there's guys like that, but I don't watch a lot of stand-up because I hate doing a joke and then somebody goes, oh man, so-and-so's doing that joke. And I went, oh, so if I have a clean conscience knowing, well, I didn't see that guy special, then I don't worry about it. I go, hey, we're 2 guys that saw the same thing. So.
Yeah, I know that feeling because as a speaker, you have to be careful of, there's a concept of fraud where you're actually using somebody else's material, especially if people are paying to hear you speak. So I'm the same way. I don't listen to a lot of speakers, not because I think I'm better than them, but I just don't want to take on the material accidentally. So here's one. We hear this term, clean comedian. Is that an oxymoron? Because when I think of clean comedian, is there such a thing as a clean comedian?
I have people come up to me and they go, I'm not a big comedy fan because it's so vulgar. It's refreshing to see somebody make us laugh with no vulgarity and to find humor and go to the line, because I started comedy in the nightclubs. Even though I'm a pastor's kid, I was in the military and I started doing comedy in the clubs. So I sharpened my wit in the areas where you didn't have to be clean. But now to be able to still have that edge and not use profanity, not use vulgarity, not use subjects inappropriate for children. I tell the comics, when you perform in front of a room full of elders, if you make them laugh, you're funny. If you're too dirty or too dumb to come up with material to make these elders laugh, you're just doing shock humor. But yes, clean comedy. Dry Bar has set the Guinness Book of World Records for views on social media, showing that there's a huge market for clean comedy. Yeah, it's a crutch. When a new comic starts out, your goal is to get 5 minutes of original material. And if using middle school bathroom humor gets a laugh, well, that's your crutch. Here's what I tell comics: there are comedians and there are jokers. Jokers hear the laughter, comedians hear the silence. So I had a friend who reached out to me. He got me in my first TV show, BET, Black Entertainment Television. Got this little Mexican on there. And he's a good Christian brother. And he reached out to me one day. He said, "You need to back off because people like you kill themselves." And I was like, "Man, what are you talking about?" He said, "You're up there for a half hour. 28 minutes was huge laughter, applause breaks, and you leave the club upset about the 2 minutes that didn't work. You need to back off." And that's where that comes from. So true comics, instant acceptance, instant rejection. When the people don't laugh, you're driving home going, "What did I mess up? Was it this word? Was it that word?" I love Johnny Carson. So there's like last night, a guy cracked up at an expression. Johnny Carson could do that. Johnny could shrug and get a big laugh. So true comedians, all they hear is when people don't laugh, that rejection. Jokers could be up there 10 minutes, tell one joke that worked, 9 that bombed, and they come off stage happy. They made people laugh with their one joke. I had a church cancel all comedy. They did comedy one night a month. This huge church in Orange County, they were offended that I talked about going through a divorce. And I went, "Yeah, you didn't wait for the end of the story. God restored my life. He gave me my wife back." Encouraging people and sharing brokenness is more important than sharing the jokes, because it gives them hope. If this guy can make us laugh for 45 minutes and then have us wiping tears about what he went through, it's all to show that when you surrender to God and allow Jesus to change your life, it's not religion, it's relationship. I love talking about that with people. I just make it simple. God is love. He wants a relationship with you. We are all sinners, but he paid the price. His propitiation, Dr. Ron Harden, got us out of our situation. So he paid the price to have relationship, and it only comes through his son, Jesus. When I was in Bible school, I got too deep. Then I backed off, and when my special is called Bible School Dropout, because I dropped out. I want to tell people about Jesus. I don't want to major in the minors. "Oh, well, you believe this and I believe that." No, I know Jesus died for my sins. I know he forgives me, and I know he loves me. Any opportunity to encourage people, I feel it's an honor. So comedian Dennis, yeah, on Instagram, on Facebook, on all the social media platforms. YouTube has a ton of videos. I have 150 million views on social media from my special. Yeah, it's crazy that at this age, I recently turned 40 10 years ago. And I wrote that joke 9 years ago, Gary. To be busier than ever is a blessing. So the jokes are out there, but they're all over social media. But God is good. Man, I appreciate it. I love you guys, man. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to my podcast. If you have any questions about today's show or would like more information on how you can bring me to your next event, please reach out and I will be sure to get back to you ASAP. Till then, have a passion-filled day.